man, R.G. Abbas.
You know who supplies him with money?
Who? Yeah.
Osama bin Laden.
Glass was wearing a wire. Mixed in with the dinner crowd were agents from the FBI's terrorism task force.
Basically, what he told me was they were interested in purchasing a large amount of sophisticated weapon systems.
And who was Abbas representing in this?
Abbas was represented to me as being an ISI agent.
And this is where the stakes really get high. Because if Abbas was telling the truth, Randy Glass and the feds were about to cut an illegal weapons deal with a Pakistani intelligence operative linked to terrorists.
Randy Glass never seemed to quite catch on. If you ask most people, have you heard about this? Have you heard about Randy Glass? They haven't heard about it.
Earlier today,
perhaps the story failed to spark the public imagination because the most dramatic revelation ended up on Dateline's cutting room floor.
I had been threatened by FBI agent Steve Brodowski that if I mentioned any of that, I would be charged with obstruction of justice.
2 months later, the Palm Beach Post ran this story.
During the course of the conversation, I asked him exactly what his intentions were. After dinner, as we walked outside, he pointed in the direction of the World Trade Center and said, "Those towers are coming down."
I'm not suggesting from this that Pakistan is the quote-unquote solution to 9/11, because it's not. Pakistan is one part in a very complicated story. But the question to me is, who else was involved with Al-Qaeda? Was Al-Qaeda used as a tool? Just as in the 1980s, the Mujahideen were basically used by the US government.
In August 2004, after the 9/11 Commission had disappointed so many of the families with its report, Paul Thompson's completed timeline was published as a book by HarperCollins. The recurring themes of Paul Thompson's timeline are clear: no accountability, few answers, and many misleads. The sponsors of the attack yet to be confronted.
Is the fact there is some sort of a deal in place between the government of Pakistan and the United States.
The men named as the culprits allowed to escape.
But we haven't really captured anybody, one or two on the fringe.
And the government officials who ignored warnings before 9/11, still in their positions.
I don't remember the Al-Qaeda cells as being something that we were told we needed to do something about.
Still, despite years of investigation and advocacy by the families and others, the official story of what really happened on September 11th remains little changed.
What is democracy? You know, it's government by the people. It's a simple equation, okay? The biggest part of democracy is the media. They have to hold everyone accountable.
You know, it would be impossible as a citizen to be up and informed on every single topic because it took us thousands of hours of research in order to be informed enough to ask the right questions here. And that's where you need media, because you know what? Somebody has to be out there connecting the dots. And we don't have that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Diane and Charlie. Please don't go away, because
I think news reporting has drastically changed since 9/11.
Rebecca Abrams, an assignment editor with ABC News.
The reporting now, there is always use of caution in how we cover a story.
For those tuning to the internet rather than network news, online buzz about President Bush in the Florida classroom had started within weeks of the attacks. But most Americans remained unaware. For nearly 3 years, the footage gathered dust on newsroom shelves as the networks avoided the issue in their anniversary retrospectives.
ABC News is going to be with you all day long, bringing you the events of the day, starting with the memorial here.
They seem to go out of their way to avoid exposing the president's lack of response.
The president thought for a second or two about getting up and walking out of the room, but the drill was coming to a close and he didn't want to alarm the children.
Instead, Bush pauses, thanks the children.
Thank you all so very much for showing me your reading skills.
And heads for the empty classroom next door.
This is Michael Moore.
Finally, into the void created by the news media glossing over the discomforting issues came filmmaker Michael Moore with his record-breaking film, Fahrenheit 9/11. Sharply critical of the administration, the film sparked controversy and fiery attacks on Moore himself, including during prime time at the Republican National Convention.
Please, my friends. He's certainly not a disingenuous filmmaker.
Why had it been left to McCain's disingenuous filmmaker to bring these questions to the American public?
Fahrenheit 9/11, which is based a lot on our reports at BBC Television on my book. ABC News has free access to everything we do at BBC Television. We say, go ahead, run it. Run the story. You don't like the way Michael Moore does it? You think it's too polemical or biased? Fine. Run the hard news, buddy.
It's on AP, it's Bulletin Crash.
We are every day kicking and screaming in the newsroom, trying to get stories out. But we could do a story and it might not make air. You have someone from the corporation making the editorial decisions. These are not journalists.
Another reaction from the administration now, and again, not exactly...
With the stifling of dissent on the rise in America after 9/11, the tough questions were not asked, much less answered.
You know, there was a time in South Africa that people would put flaming tires around people's necks if they dissented. And in some ways, the fear is that you'll be necklaced here. You'll have a flaming tire of lack of patriotism put around your neck. Now, it's that fear that keeps journalists from asking the toughest of the tough questions.
So all this information keeps popping out here and there, but what happens is that no one wants to take the ball and run with it because all the information's there. If we could put it together and get it into the Washington Post as a 10-day series, and people are saying, unbelievable.
The facts were dribbled out and over such an extended period of time that I think that effect was lost on the American public. The press should have been doing a better job of putting those conflicts, if you will, side by side in a cumulative report.
But that's not the job of reporting. That's the job of editorial pages and politicians and others to make those kinds of judgments, and the public itself and the 9/11 relatives themselves to make those kinds of assertions. All we can do in our reporting is report facts. And we have reported those facts, and we have held those facts up against public statements at the time, which is why they know that that's what took place from our reporting.
This is a scandal of tremendous proportions. It makes Watergate look small. But there's a strange lack of interest of people both on the left and on the right. Nobody seems to want to uncover the truth and just follow leads wherever they may go, because I think that goes to a lot of really damaging places.
Maybe we shouldn't have questioned whether or not President Nixon had any involvement in Watergate. Maybe we should have just accepted that story. Maybe we should have accepted the story that President Clinton had no involvement, had never had sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. So just because it's the official story of record does not mean that we should not delve further and to see if really that is the actual story.
Yes, they lied. They all lied. Whether consciously or unconsciously, it happened. Now we need to look into why they lied and what were the results of those lies.